Hello, Gene Schwimmer here. Welcome to today's vlog. Today I want to, as I said yesterday, I want to expand or actually build on the subject that I talked about yesterday relating to mass shootings, which seems to be the topic of the day, well, for obvious reasons. But yesterday I was talking about the stupidity of, that's how I view it, stupidity of gun-safe zones, how they actually make people who go into those zones less safe. I'm not going to recap everything that I said yesterday. You can just go back and watch the video, which of course I encourage you to do. It was only yesterday, so it should be easy to find. Today, what I want to talk about is an argument that gun control zealots, that's what I call them, zealots, because they really are obsessed with this subject, with the idea of gun control. In fact, I'll just put in a little aside here. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's a scientist, a very liberal scientist. It's obvious from the way he talks about climate change that he's very liberal. But he mentioned that there are other things, other events, such as car accidents, that cause many, many more deaths than mass shootings. Mass shootings obviously are very horrific. They get a lot of attention, which is what I'm going to get to in today's vlog. But he got severely criticized for that, simply for pointing out a fact and telling people to calm down a little bit, because in the light of the number of deaths from other causes, the number of deaths, the chances of somebody getting killed in a mass shooting or even shot in a mass shooting is actually very small. He got, as I said, severely criticized for that because of the obsession of gun zealots. So I want to refute an argument, one of the arguments that gun zealots made, and also point out a little bit of hypocrisy, especially on the part of the press. Here's the argument. It goes like this. You need a license to drive a car, so why shouldn't you need a license to buy a gun? Now, the problem with that argument is that driving a car is not a constitutional right. There is no clause in the Constitution that everybody has a right to drive a car. Owning a firearm, on the other hand, is a constitutional right. So that's the problem. You're comparing apples and oranges. You're comparing a simple state-level police power with a constitutional right. So let's compare apples to apples. One constitutional amendment to another constitutional amendment. The Second Amendment to the First Amendment. The Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, and the First Amendment right to, well, freedom of the press. So here's the argument for restricting freedom of the press, as these gun zealots would do to the Second Amendment. Now, as numerous articles have shown, such as the one I'm featuring up here, I'm going to read a quote. I'm talking about the El Paso shooter, who, like all shooters, and this is what I'm going to be getting at, put out a manifesto shortly before his shooting. So the manifesto, found by investigators, carried tragic echoes of previous attacks. The alleged shooter in Pittsburgh last year also ranted about an, quote, invasion, unquote, before opening fire there. And the manifesto in Texas also referenced the alleged New Zealand attacker who opened fire in mosques there this year, killing 51 people, who had posted a manifesto citing a previous mass shooter in the United States. So what are we talking about here? We are talking about shooters, more than one, who are inspired, who get the idea to perpetrate their own crimes from what they read about earlier crimes. Now, obviously, if these crimes were not reported in the press, then they could not be inspired by them. They wouldn't even know about them. So if we're going to require a license to buy a gun, why can we not, on the same logic, require a license to read a newspaper or to access the internet, and especially the internet, because remember, these shooters probably are learning of these earlier shootings on the internet. And you have it on the one end, the shooters reading these things on the internet, especially these manifestos, and then you have the shooters who create manifestos putting them on the internet for people to read. And also about the internet, let's not forget suicides, especially by children and teenagers. There have been a number of cases, because we talk also about people using guns to commit suicide. Well, people have committed suicide, especially, as I said, young people, from reading insults and negative comments on the internet about them. So that's, would seem to me, if we're using the same logic as we were using for cars, why not have an age limit, require people to be 21 years old to access the internet, to put anything on it, or to read anything or see or hear anything on it, because it's documented, we all know this, it causes some people to commit suicide. Young people and maybe older people too, for all I know. Why can't we restrict access to the press? Or why, to use another argument that these gun zealots use, no constitutional right is absolute. So why can't we have, this is their term, reasonable restrictions on access to guns and buying guns? So why can't we have reasonable restrictions on the press? For example, if somebody perpetrates a mass shooting, the press can report it. But let's say if it's a newspaper, yes, you can report it, but you are limited to 1 column inch. Just enough to say that the event happened, but that's all, and no names. Just say there was a mass shooting today, period. That's the news. Or there was a mass shooting in New Zealand or wherever, period. That's it. You don't need the details. You know there was a mass shooting, and you cannot put it on the front page. It must be in between the first page and the last page, somewhere in the middle. It has to be buried in the paper, 1 column inch. If you want to find it, you can find it, but it's not on the front page and it's not prominently displayed. And you can do the same thing on the internet. You have to bury stories of a mass shooting, and if there's a manifesto, you have to delete it. We have artificial intelligence programs. We can look for manifestos on the internet and we can delete them. We can delete hate speech, which is what Facebook purports to do anyhow. What they actually do is just delete conservative speech. But you see what I'm talking about? Obviously, I'm joking. I'm not serious about this, but the gun zealots, they are serious about what they mean. And finally, getting back to cars, I'll throw in another ridiculous example. We were talking about cars and you need a driver's license to drive a car. Well, there's another issue that can be addressed. And remember that there is no constitutional right to drive a car. So let's talk about drive-by shootings, where somebody drives by in a car and opens fire at somebody. Actually, I told you I used to live in Harlem. I've told you in past videos, I just moved here to Tennessee in January. I lived in Harlem for 10 years, and there was a drive-by shooting right across the street from me. Guy just drove by, shot somebody. The person did not die, fortunately. In fact, I guess it's embarrassing. He was shot in the ass and the rear end. But that's not the point. The point is that to perpetrate a drive-by shooting or a bank robbery, bank robbers generally don't walk into a bank and rob the bank and then just stroll out or run down the street. There's a getaway car. You see what I'm talking about here? For a bank robbery or a drive-by shooting, especially a drive-by shooting, just by definition, you need a gun, but you need a car. So you gun zealots out there, what is your plan to keep automobiles out of the hands of criminals? What are the restrictions that you want to put on the ability to buy and drive a car that will keep criminals from buying and driving cars? I have a comment section in the video, so you got an idea, let me know. And that's it for today. That's my rant. Thanks for stopping by. Well, as usual, thumbs up if you like the video, and share it with anybody you think would enjoy it or benefit from it, or it's they're not mutually exclusive. Both enjoy it and benefit from it. You can put, well, I already told you, put comments in the comments section. You can also put a suggestion for a future topic. You got a Twitter account, then feel free to tweet out my URL to your followers, invite them to retweet, and of course watch the videos. And finally, subscribe. It would be great if you would subscribe, but especially even more than great if you come back again. I would love to see everybody again. So that's it for now. See you all again soon. Bye.